Hello everyone, this is Eye on Africa for Friday, April 22nd. Here are the headlines. The French army says Russian mercenaries staged fake evidence of mass graves in areas handed back in the end of Operation Barkhane. They believe the men seen in the pictures are members of the Wagner Group. Mwai Kibaki has died. The former president of Kenya ruled the country from 2002 to 2013. We'll take a look back at the mixed legacy he leaves behind. And we get up close and personal with the silverback gorillas of Gabon. The Luanga National Park has finally reopened to visitors after a 2-year shutdown due to the pandemic. But first, the French military says it has videos of Russian mercenaries burying bodies near an army base in Mali. They say the goal was to falsely accuse France's departing forces of leaving behind mass graves. Aerial surveillance images taken by the French military show what appear to be white soldiers covering bodies with sand near the Gossi military base in the country's north. The French army believes the soldiers in the video are members of the Wagner Group, a private Russian mercenary force. Delano de Souza has more.
It's the first time France has chosen to publish drone footage. This as Paris winds down its almost decade-long military operation in Mali. French forces left the Gossi military base on Tuesday. A day later, Chinese-made vehicles allegedly used by the Malian army arrive at the abandoned base. Images claim to show Malian soldiers spent the night outside, and according to the French army, Wagner mercenaries slept in a tent. Later on Wednesday, a tweet sent from a fake account spoke of crimes committed at the base by already departed French forces. Surveillance footage filmed the next morning appears to show soldiers covering corpses with sand. Then another tweet sent from the same fake account shows a video of the scene which had just been staged. French drone footage released shows soldiers filming the bodies they had covered with sand. This is the Gossi military base evacuated by French troops earlier this week, and some 3 kilometers away is the scene of the staged atrocity.
This is a disinformation stunt that was in the making, and the French military decided for the first time to go public on it.
France and the United States have accused Wagner mercenaries of deploying in Mali. However, local authorities say they're in the country as military instructors. The latest revelation from the French army comes as relations between France and Mali plunge even further.
Meanwhile, the country's ruling junta is defying demands by ECOWAS to limit the transition period during the return to democratic rule. In a statement, Mali's prime minister said that it was impossible to move any faster and that the junta was sticking to a 2-year transition period. ECOWAS nations have said they still want elections to be held in no more than 16 months. Talks between the two parties continue. Lawmakers in Niger have approved a bill that will allow the redeployment of European special forces. Earlier this year, Niger's president had agreed to host some of those forces that are leaving neighboring Mali. Around 2,400 French troops and 900 special forces from the French-led Takuba force are expected to leave in the next few months. The redeployment will add to French and European special forces that are already stationed along Niger's border with Mali. 6 people have been killed in an explosion at a coastal restaurant in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. The Somali National News Agency has blamed the attack on al-Shabaab fighters, but there has been no confirmation from officials. The blast happened in a restaurant located in an upscale part of town. The eatery was often frequented by security and government officials. According to local media, the commander of the Somali police force, as well as 11 members of parliament, were at the restaurant at the time of the attack. There is no word on their condition. The former president of Kenya, Mwai Kibaki, has died. The news was announced by current president Uhuru Kenyatta. Kibaki led the country from 2002 to 2013, and he leaves a mixed legacy behind him. Caroline Lambley has more.
It is my sorrowful duty.
A British-trained economist, Mwai Kibaki leaves behind a legacy of strong economic growth. He launched major infrastructure projects and introduced free basic education for children.
Mwai Kibaki.
But his time in power was also marred by major corruption scandals and lavish spending. And his disputed re-election in 2007 sparked bloody ethnic battles, something that's not been seen in the country before or after. More than 1,200 people were killed, and 500,000 were forced from their homes. On Friday, President Kenyatta paid his respects to his former political rival. He said a state funeral would be held and declared a mourning period.
President Kibaki will forever be remembered as a gentleman in Kenyan politics, a brilliant debater whose eloquence, wit, and charm won the day time and time again.
Twitter has been inundated with largely positive tributes. Some, however, were critical, like Kenyan opposition politician Miguna, a controversial figure. He accused Kibaki of having stolen the 2007 election. Kibaki will also be remembered for the 2010 constitution. It introduced a more decentralized political system and limited presidential powers.
The 7 countries that belong to the East African community have agreed to set up a regional military force. That is according to a statement from the office of the Kenyan presidency following an EAC meeting in Nairobi on Thursday. The goal of the force will be to end decades of violence caused by militant activity in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. That country joined the EAC just last month. The group is now calling on all armed groups to either join a political process to resolve their grievances or, quote, to be handled militarily. Now to a worrying development in Tunisia. The president of Tunisia has seized control of the country's electoral commission, saying he would replace most of its members. The head of the commission has told the Reuters news agency that the decision meant the body was no longer independent. He had previously angered the president, Kais Saied, by criticizing his plans to hold a referendum. Saied has already dismissed parliament and taken control of the judiciary. He's currently rewriting the constitution that was introduced after the revolution back in 2011. 2 months after it began, the war in Ukraine continues to have consequences around the world. The conflict has pushed up wheat prices on the global market and has increased inflation, hitting the economy of several countries hard. Bastien Renouille and Caroline Kameu report on some of the consequences of the war in Rwanda.
Like every morning, Abdulatif Senga is off to buy wheat flour for his bread shop.
How much for some flour? It's currently going for €2.
€2 for 2 kilos of flour is 25% more expensive than before the Ukrainian war.
For 3 weeks, there's been a hike in prices. It went from €1.70 to €1.80, €1.90, €2, and today it's €2.20. For my regular customers, I keep the price at €2.
This shopkeeper runs the most famous chapati restaurant in Kigali. Still, he's lost half of his daily salary in just a few weeks. Each piece goes for 10 cents.
To keep my customers, I try not to increase the price per unit of the chapati. But to compensate, I had to reduce their size and my margin.
But according to some Rwandan economists, inflation is likely to continue to accelerate, and the government will have to act quickly to find alternatives to Russian wheat, which accounts for 64% of Rwanda's imports.
In the short term, we need to change our consumption habits, practices, and invest more in technological research. Here in Rwanda, certain initiatives are being considered, like using locally produced cereals such as maize, which is produced in large quantities, as well as sorghum and different types of tubers.
Authorities say they are considering various alternatives. Nevertheless, inflation is likely to slow economic growth this year. It's now expected to be at 7%, a decline of nearly 4 percentage points from last year.
After 2 years of total shutdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Gabon's Loanga National Park recently reopened its doors to visitors, and they can now go back to admiring and getting close to hundreds of silverback gorillas. Conservationists say revenue generated by this kind of tourism could help preserve the giant apes as well as other species. Laurent Bersacher has the story.
Following the trail deep into the jungle, when suddenly Kamaya comes into view. The massive silverback gorilla barely glances at the intruders before slipping off his branch and lying down on the ground for his afternoon nap. A relaxed attitude that stems from years of work by local conservationists to get gorillas used to human contact.
As you can see now, Kamaya is sitting calmly. He's lying down. He is sleeping. He trusts us. We help gorillas grow accustomed to our presence. Tourists come to see them, and they serve as ambassadors for their own protection.
After 2 years of pandemic-induced shutdown, Gabon's Luanga National Park is once again open to visitors. Its main attraction, around 1,500 silverback gorillas freely roaming in the wilderness. An hour spent with Kamaya and his tribe costs around 450 euros per person. The funds are then reinvested to help conservation and preservation efforts.
It allows bringing needed funds into the park system to protect the gorillas and actually a lot of other species through them as well. They are often like a flagship species where they are very charismatic.
Gabon isn't the first country to bank on tourism for conservation. In Uganda and Rwanda, similar strategies have helped double the gorilla population over the past 30 years.
That does it for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you very much for watching. Live from Paris continues right after the break with Julia Kim. Stay with us.
France 24 and RFI in partnership with France 2 and France Inter with Ipsos Sopra Steria.
Special event.
Who will be France's next president? We're counting down to the second round of the presidential election on April 24th.
How close? Our campaign coverage kicks off from 7 p.m. Paris time. We'll be crossing a campaign headquarters. To our correspondents throughout France and around the world, first results from 8 p.m.
Our election night coverage continues at 10 p.m. with analysis, reporting, and reaction from both candidates and kingmakers.
How will this election change France? What will be its impact on Europe and the wider world? Join us for our second and final round election coverage here on France 24 and France24.com.